Hey, what's going on? Welcome to my channel. My name is Albert. And when I started this channel, I was documenting my progress on selling Tesla puts. What's going on right now, though, is I'm not really selling any Tesla puts anymore, at least for the time being, just because the market's not going so well, and I'm just holding on to a lot of puts, so things aren't really changing. So I didn't want to stop making videos, so I'm gonna talk about something different today. But really quickly before I get into that, what happened recently in Tesla is obviously delivery numbers got released. And they said in there June was the highest production month in the entire company history. So why that's really important is because the only reason Q2 deliveries were poor this quarter is because they were shut down in China, which is their highest producing factory for like a whole month of May, right? Or maybe it was April, I don't know. But they were shut down for like a whole month, so they didn't produce cars for the entire month. But June is their highest production in the company history. That means that this month was the best month ever. So if you kind of think about it moving forward, like what's going to happen, they're going to have their best months ever, and it's only going to get better from here. So I don't think any shutdowns are going to happen, and if that's the case, then things are going to go well. So that's really good news. If you listen to headlines and stuff, they're saying, oh, Tesla missed deliveries. Yeah, that's true, but you got to listen a little bit between the lines. Okay, cool. So I definitely wanted to keep making videos. It was one of my goals this year to just make a video a week, so I'm going to stay with it. And I thought today it'd be interesting to talk a little bit about stuff that I learned from doing a startup. Not gonna say it's gonna be useful or it's gonna be educational or anything like that, but or even positive, but it's just stuff that I've learned from doing a startup. All right. Okay, so just a real quick background on my startup. We have a company called Parting Pro, and we make software for funeral homes. And the gist of it is we make it very easy for families to be able to make arrangements with funeral homes entirely online. They don't have to go in to sign paperwork. They don't have to do anything. Most of our customers focus on direct cremation. That means the family just gets the deceased cremated, and then the ashes get returned back to the family. There's no service or anything like that. So this is a very simple transaction, and it can be done online. Versus normally you have to go in to meet with someone. They would sell you stuff, and you don't really know what's going on. Getting pricing is difficult. So most funeral homes are pretty old school, so they do a lot of stuff by fax and stuff, and it's really difficult. So yeah, I just think that there's some opportunity to make things easier for families because people are used to a certain level of convenience nowadays, right? And so that's what we do. In terms of how long I've been doing it, we've been doing it for about 6 years now. It's going okay. We have about 25 to 30 employees, all remote, all across the country, and then some in the Philippines as well. And then for me personally, I focus on sales. I have a team of 8 people. And prior to doing this, I had no experience in sales, so kind of just figuring it out as I go. Yeah, so that's kind of a gist of the company. So some of the stuff that I wanted to write down when people ask me about how things are going, these are things I typically say, and it's true. So when you're doing a startup, or if you're a co-founder of a startup, I don't think a lot of people talk about how hard it is. It's usually when you hear about it, like you read about it, it's like always like the good news that people just raise money or they just got some valuation. But in reality, it's not really that fun. And personally, for my experience, I think for a few reasons. One is that it's a huge opportunity cost, right? Because you're basically stopping your career and doing something completely different, and you basically are starting from zero. So for at least for me, I say it's a huge opportunity cost is because I went from making money to making no money, and obviously what sucks about that is like having less money. But what also sucks about that I don't think people talk about is like the mentality of making less money and having a business that isn't doing so well in the beginning is really hard, right? Because it's very hard to not compare as well. It's like, oh, what would have happened if I just stayed at my job, or what would happen if I progress in my job for the last 6 years? Like, where would I be right now? You look at your friends, what are they doing? So that part of it is really hard, mentally, right? Another thing that happens a lot with startups, from my experience, is like you get a lot of like really good news, and then you get a lot of really bad news like right away, or things might happen, things might not happen, right? So it's like your whole day can just your whole like for example, like you could find out that something you're gonna get $1 million from something, right? And then 2 days later, that just goes away, right? So there's a lot of like emotional up and down that happens. because it's like kind of a roller coaster. So after a while, you kind of just become really immune to it. So it's like you don't get too happy, you don't get too sad because anything can happen. And then another thing with startups that I've learned is like the constantly moving goalposts, right? And I talked about this in the past, but like very similarly, I'm sure if you experienced it, like you kind of move up the career ladder when you're younger, you start making more money, and then you start like wishing for a higher salary. Once you get it, you're like super happy for like 2 days, and then you're sad again, right? That is kind of how you feel when you're doing a startup, except I would say it's like 10 times or 100 times, even 100 times worse. So because like you're constantly building something, you're constantly getting to you're making certain achievements, but once you get there, you realize it's not enough. You got to keep going, keep going, keep going. And it just leads to unhappiness because you're never really happy where you're at. And that's my experience. And yeah, so like, so I'm noticing a lot of these are negative things, which is things that I don't think people focus on or people even talk about. But yeah, that's kind of my experience with it. It's just very difficult to just like look back and be like, oh, like look at what I accomplished. It's so great, etc., etc. So other things I've learned that aren't negative, I don't think, is I don't think anyone knows what they're doing in general. Like I don't think any companies really know what they're doing. Like one of the things that I had trouble with the company is like I feel like I never knew what I was doing, right? It's like, dude, what am I doing? Like, how do we do this? How do we do that? And you're just kind of figuring it out. And then I think even larger companies also don't know what they're doing. And I think most companies are just like a clusterfuck underneath the hood. And yeah, and that's okay. I think that's totally okay. So I always thought like these established companies like have everything really figured out, but in reality, I don't think that's true. And I think that if you are doing a startup and you don't have it figured out, it's totally okay because no one really does. That was like an interesting tidbit I think I picked up over the years. Another thing with doing a startup, I thought is different from working at like a regular job, is like anything can happen, right? There's no limit on what can happen. So I don't know, like there's like 4 or 5 years ago. No, it must have been like 6 years ago. I forgot the situation, but we met with someone famous or something, and yeah, like well, let's say for example you're trying to raise money, right? You can like raise money all of a sudden, like anything can happen, and it'll definitely affect you. I don't know if this is I don't know if it's a good way to explain it, but yeah, it's just like you could get a big customer, you could do this, you could do that, like, anything is possible. Whereas where you're working on a job, you kind of you kind of know what's gonna happen. So so yeah, kind of hope that makes sense. And then another thing with doing a startup is like you kind of don't really do anything well. At least for me, like you don't really do anything well. Like your job is really just to figure out like how to get something to work from zero, and then put people in place to like kind of start running it and doing that one thing better. So you're not really specialized in anything. So it kind of does feel like a lot like I don't have any skills because I don't feel like I'm the master of anything. It's just like you kind of just like okay at a lot of different things, if that makes any sense. Okay, and then I wanted to have some positives too. It's obviously not all negative. I think the biggest positive is well, I'll kind of I'll precursor this positive with a negative, but I think one thing that I suffer from is imposter syndrome for all the previous reasons that I just mentioned. But then once you kind of get over that, you can look back and like, oh, well, we actually did achieve something, and then you actually have something, right? Like you actually own part of something. So that part of it is actually really nice if you get over all the other stuff, because now you kind of own something, and you're like, oh, there's like if you leave a job, like, you kind of like everything stays with the company, but like this is like actually something that's yours. And then also obviously doing a startup, you get like certain types of freedom that I think are really awesome, but often overlooked. So like not having a boss is actually really cool. But also not having a boss kind of sucks too in certain ways. And then you also have the power to make changes, right? Because you have authority to just do whatever you want, which is cool. And then another thing that I think is really cool is like you actually like support people, right? So people work, like people have jobs because of you. Like it's weird to think about. Like there's like families that live like that you employ that live because of this thing that you just thought of that you started doing. And yeah, that's kind of a weird thing to think about. I was just thinking about it when I was writing the slide. I was like, oh yeah, that's a really weird feeling for me. It feels kind of good. So those are some positives. Like I said, I didn't say any of this was going to be useful information. So yeah, hopefully this helps. And then I made a slide here that I typed as typical advice because these are some of the things that I learned while doing it, but it's also what people say all the time. So it's pretty cliche, but I think it's pretty true. So I think the most important part of having a successful startup is when you hire someone, right? And if you hire the right person, then it will make the world of difference because then that entire whatever that person's in charge of is just like you don't have to worry about it anymore, and it'll get better on its own. That being said, if you hire the wrong person, you have to fire that person as fast as possible. Literally as fast as possible, because like a bad employee can really bring down the entire company. And then another thing I think is super obvious, but I don't know if we do this very well, is like managing finances is super important. So like if you raise money or or whatever, like you have to still treat this money like it's not coming back. So treat it like your own money, right? And this is something I'm really good at is like, hey, like we can't spend money. You gotta cut everywhere you can. And there's no fucking free LaCroix or Quest bars, or whatever, right? I think if you're trying to, I guess it depends how much money you have, but at least from my perspective, it's like, hey, like you should cut where you can cut. For a small startup like mine. Another thing that I didn't think was super important in the beginning, and then I can see why it is important. And like a lot of VCs talk about this all the time, is like your total addressable market. So like where the size of your company can grow to, or like the size of your customer base can grow to. I think it's super important because you're gonna run out of space to grow at some point. So if you're gonna start a company, you gotta make sure that TAM is large enough. And another thing I think is super useful is getting your pricing right and making money as fast as possible and just not giving things out for free and charging for everything. I think that's super important. Like, cause like getting pricing right is really, really important. I mean, how you do that is you just basically keep increasing the price till people don't buy your product anymore, right? And do a lot of surveying and asking a lot of people, like just spending a lot of time on pricing. I think pricing is super important. And if you're doing if you're just starting out, like you're a brand new startup, I think what you need to focus on is don't focus on getting a lot of customers, but focus on getting really, really happy customers. Like just maybe 10 super happy customers. Because if you get 10 super happy customers and they're willing to go on video and like talk about how great you are, then that social proof will sell itself, right? So I think that's probably the fastest way to go about it, is just getting super happy customers and then using social proof to sell. So yeah, man, I don't know, just a bunch of random information about my experience doing a startup. Hope that is helpful, I guess, in some way. And yeah, sorry I don't have any Tesla put selling, but yeah, I'm just gonna hold off until I can until I feel better about the market. Then I'll start selling more puts. All right, thank you. Hope this helps. Bye. Hey, another real quick thing. I know I have said a bunch of negative things about doing a startup, but I just really want to be transparent. But to be honest, like once I sell this company, and if I were to go back and start working again, I would definitely do another startup. So just want to throw it out there. I do think, for me at least, I prefer it over working like a normal job. So yeah, just want to make that clear. I'm saying a lot of things about doing a startup that are really negative, which is true. I think it's super true. But there's a lot of positives I don't really talk about. And then when you kind of look back about the suffering you went through, it's actually kind of funny. It's kind of fun. So I want to throw it out there. Don't want to come off as like too negative. I don't hate my life or anything. Yeah, so all right, thanks.